Okay, Patricia, are you seeing my screen? Perfect. Okay, well, welcome to our pre-workshop webinar for the Adaptation Planning and Practices for Wildlife Management course. I recognize, I think, all of your names because I've been studying our participant list religiously for the last couple of weeks. So I know we've got a great group. We won't do detailed introductions today, so please continue putting your names and information into the chat just so everyone else can get a sense of who your fellow travelers are in this course. And we're sitting at about 25 participants, so I think we'll probably just get going. This is going to be recorded, which is my first note to everyone, that in case you want to relive this experience, or in case you have team members who weren't able to be here today, we're recording this webinar plus all of our lectures. We'll be posting those recordings to our public YouTube page, so everyone will be able to come back and get this at any time or share it with your team members. And so we'll follow up after this webinar closes with the link to get that information. So as long as everyone is aware that you're being recorded for all time, anything you say can and will be used against you, we'll get started. So first of all, I wanted to offer my personal welcome. So I'm Stephen Handler. I work for the U.S. Forest Service and the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. I'm based up in Houghton, Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. We've got beautiful snowy conditions today outside. I'm sure many of you have the same. And we have a great group of co-instructors who are going to be each taking turns leading different aspects of this course. A couple of these folks are on the webinar right now, so I wanted to give them a chance to introduce themselves. Patricia, I'll call on you first, please.
Hi, everybody. Patricia Leopold here. I'm also in Houghton, Michigan as part of the NIAX crew. That means I've taught one or two of these courses before, more generally on every topic you can imagine. So this course is really exciting as our first adaptation course that's focused specifically on wildlife management. And then every day I normally coordinate the climate change response framework projects in the Mid-Atlantic and Central Appalachians. And so I hope if you guys are in that region and you need help finding resources on vulnerability or adaptation, you can reach out to me.
Thanks, Patricia. Steve Harris, I think I saw you on as well.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Steve Harris. I'm from the Hoosier National Forest in Indiana. I'm the district biologist over there. I've just started a detail with NIAX and with Stephen and Patricia. So this will be a learning process for me too, and we'll probably learn this together.
Thanks, Steve. And just quickly on behalf of some of the folks who aren't here, so Chris Hoving, Ben Zuckerberg, Olivia Ledee, and myself, we're all recently co-authors on a tool that we're going to be featuring as part of this course, the Wildlife Adaptation Menu. Marta is an ecologist with the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center, working with Olivia. Ben Zuckerberg is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Chris Hoving is an adaptation specialist with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Wildlife Division. So we've got a good breadth of experience and interests here. And you all will get to learn more about all of these instructors throughout the course. Different instructors are leading different discussion groups, which you all have been assigned to, so you'll get a lot more in the weeds. And I think everyone has been assigned a primary contact for this course, so you've probably already been in touch with at least one of these folks, just with any questions or comments about the project ideas that you started with. So, like Patricia and I mentioned, and Steve mentioned, the three of us at least are representing an organization called NIACS, the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. Just for those of you who aren't familiar with NIACS, maybe this is the first time you're hearing that fun acronym. We are kind of a hybrid organization of federal and non-federal partners. You see the logos down at the bottom of the screen. So we have a steering group, just kind of like our board of directors, which includes Forest Service, academic institutions from around the country, a forest industry science group, National Conservation Organization, and a tribal commission. And so that diverse group of stakeholders that is really our leadership council. These are the organizations that define what NIACS is and how we can be most useful. And through time, our mission has evolved basically to be kind of a support center for land managers who are interested to think about climate change risks and adaptation for the work that they need to get done, for folks who are paying special attention to carbon management in ecosystems. And in those topic areas, we focus on helping people translate science into action. And so we're kind of like a tech transfer, but I have the most fun when I say we're basically like a climate change help desk for land managers. So we're that friendly voice at the end of the phone for folks who are ready to have these discussions. And we will be talking extensively about climate change adaptation throughout this course. So just to put a marker down at the outset of this and let everyone know kind of how we approach this idea of climate change adaptation, I thought I would just spend a minute or two explaining what we mean at NIACS when we talk about climate change adaptation. And so we take a pretty broad definition of this term. And so we mean any adjustment of a system in preparation or response to climate change can count as adaptation. So that's a pretty wide umbrella of ideas. More specifically, to put a finer point on it, adaptation ideas should be designed intentionally to account for climate change impacts and vulnerabilities. And so when we say intentionally, that means it's something you do deliberately, with scrutiny, with your eyes open, rather than falling back on, say, business as usual or conventional management practices that you assume are going to hold up under climate change or that you assume will still be valuable carrying forward. That intentionality bit means that you're willing to scrutinize and think closely about climate change risks, and then carry forward kind of in a logical sequence. If I have this risk that I'm disclosing, how will I cope with it? How will I avoid it or tolerate it? So that's the intentionality piece. And then the second part of that statement, in order to meet your goals and objectives. And so this is something you all are getting a sense for now with all of our communication before we've even started this course. We put a lot of focus on helping managers articulate what outcomes do you care about? What is it that you value in your work? Because climate adaptation is really, it's all about helping you continue to meet your objectives. We're not just adapting for the sake of doing something different or for the sake of saying that we're responding to climate change. Adaptation should be purely in the pursuit of helping you get the work done that you need to get done and to attain your objectives that you've set out for yourself. Something that we come to again and again is this idea that adaptation doesn't necessarily mean tearing up everything that you know about ecosystem management or wildlife management or restoration or conservation, starting from scratch. In many ways, climate adaptation can build on and support some of the good work that you're already doing for sustainable management, conservation, and restoration. And a couple, I guess, critical reflection sorts of questions that will come up again and again in this course is that deciding on the right path forward for climate adaptation depends on your values, or your agency's values, the values of your clients and stakeholders, and your perception of risk and your willingness to tolerate risk. And because everyone has a different answer to these questions, there really is no one size fits all kind of broadly applied prescription we can give you for how best to adapt and prepare. I think you all have a sense of this, but climate adaptation is going to be something that is very customized to each situation, each management project, each place on the landscape. And so I might as well just dispel that right off of the bat. If you came into this course thinking that Patricia and Steve and I and others are going to be able to tell you, here's what you should do to adapt to climate change, we're mostly going to be saying, well, it depends. What are your values? What do you care about? How much risk can you tolerate? Because there is no single answer. And I think you all probably had a sense for this already. So our role as facilitators is to be asking questions, nudging you if you need to, helping you understand your full range of possibilities, helping you work through this thought process, which might be novel to you. But ultimately, you are the ones who are going to be making these decisions, deciding the best path forward for how to adapt in the specific projects that you all have started describing. And so that should be kind of exciting and empowering, that no one can tell you best how to do it. You all get to decide for yourselves. It can be a little mind-blowing, and we get that, and we'll help you wrestle with some of those uncertainties throughout the course. So the process that we have developed at NIACS with our partners to help people navigate this complicated question of how should I adapt and prepare for changes that are coming. The process that we use is called the Adaptation Workbook. It was first published in this document that you see on the screen here, Forest Adaptation Resources. NIACS has a history of focusing on forest management and silviculture. That's where we got our start. Over time, we've been broadening our focus to deal with a whole wide range of land management topics, now including wildlife, also things like outdoor recreation and agriculture and watershed planning. And so we use this adaptation workbook in a whole bunch of different ecosystem and land management contexts. It's very flexible. It's designed to meet a diverse range of objectives and landowner types. And it's really centered around helping make use of your expertise and your judgment. And the benefit here is that along the way, we're going to be going through a sequence of steps. And at each point, you have an opportunity to document your rationale and to put your thoughts on paper so that you have a record of, here's what I considered, here's the decision I made, here's how I'm choosing to go forward. And again, so this is not a document or a process that is full of recommendations for you. So you're not going to get a prescription, a pre-baked prescription on how to move forward. I mentioned a sequence of steps. And so our adaptation workbook is really centered around the 5 steps that you see on the screen here. This flowchart should probably feel familiar to you or similar to other sorts of adaptive management flowcharts that you might be familiar with. And it should. It's not rocket science, and it's not earth-shattering. But what it is a logical way to move through this potentially confusing and mysterious situation. And so we have found that Moving through a process in this regimented logical order, answering questions at each step along the way, helps you craft your own adaptation plan in a way that is rigorous and robust and traceable or accountable, because you've taken time at each step to disclose your thoughts and put things down on paper. There are opportunities in this workbook where we'll be asking you to go out and draw in a lot of other useful information. For example, the second step on assessing climate change impacts and vulnerabilities, you'll be going out into the world and looking at available literature on climate change impacts for your part of the country, for specific resources or habitats or wildlife species that you all are focusing on. The first step, defining management objectives. Maybe you already reached out into the world to grab some of those ideas from an existing management plan or a stewardship plan that has already been written. And then also in this fourth step of the process, where we brainstorm and get creative and identify climate adaptation approaches and tactics, we'll be using a companion resource that we call a wildlife adaptation menu. We'll get more into that in a little bit, but I guess just a preview that you will be, as part of this homework, as part of the lectures, we'll be exposing you to other information that you'll get to draw into this. Okay, so I think you all have a good sense of this. But just to reiterate, what are our primary objectives here for this course that you all have registered for? Big picture, we're helping you integrate climate change considerations into your work. We want this course to be useful to you. And that's why we design these courses around project-based thinking. So hopefully you are making use of a project idea that is currently on your desk or something that you plan to be working on in the next couple of months, so that you can get a real taste for how climate change adaptation can fit into the everyday work that you need to do. Through this process, we'll be identifying local climate change impacts, thinking about challenges and opportunities that climate change presents. You will be developing a really customized climate adaptation plan that's tailored to your needs and your project. We'll get a lot of practice with communication, just informally in our discussion sessions. We'll get some practice kind of verbalizing. These are some of the risks I'm worried about. These are some of my uncertainties. Here's how they challenge the feasibility of my management objectives. So you'll get some small group practice with that, and then a slightly formal practice at the end, where you present your whole adaptation plan to the group. And so that's also part of the learn by doing approach here. I'm really happy with the diverse mix of projects that we have. Folks from coast to coast have signed up for this course. There's certainly a cluster of you in the upper Midwest around the Great Lakes, but even within that cluster, there are folks thinking about elk. There are folks thinking about grassland birds. There are folks thinking about snowshoe hare and grouse. So we've got a really nice spread topically and geographically. You all will be getting to learn a lot more detail about your co-students here, because we've divvied you up into discussion groups that are each about 7 projects or so. So that'll be kind of your smaller cohort that you'll get to learn more about, ask questions, bounce ideas off of each other. So that's one of the benefits of this course, is also to learn from your peers. just recently, I think on Wednesday, everyone should have gotten an email from the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, a constant contact newsletter that shared a link to our course syllabus. If anyone didn't get this, I would recommend first check your spam folder in your email. And secondly, if you're still having a hard time digging it up, email me or Patricia, and we'll make sure that we have the right address and that you got that information. So that syllabus has much more detail about the course, format, expectations, time commitment, all that stuff. I'm going to run through a couple of the high points here to make sure that folks aren't surprised. So there is participation almost every week for the next 8 weeks. Our first lecture is going to be on February 28th. And we'll have Monday lectures every week for about an hour. You all should have calendar invites already for each of those sessions. We do have a vacation in there. The week of March 21st, there's no lecture, no discussion sessions, no anything. It's just a time for you to either take a complete break or get caught up if there's anything where you're lagging behind. We will also have 4 discussion sessions throughout the course where you meet with that smaller group, like I just described, of 6 or 7 projects plus a couple of the course instructors. You each also should have calendar invitations for your particular discussion session, either a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning or afternoon. We have 3 potential discussion slots. And then there'll be some informal check-ins that we ask you to do with your project contacts throughout the course. So you all have already been in touch with those instructors who are your primary contacts. We'll have you check in a couple of times throughout the course just to make sure you're not struggling with any steps of the workbook, or it's an opportunity for you all to ask for help. If you're looking for resources on a particular topic, you have a person who's just an email away for the whole duration of this course. Those of you who think in spreadsheets like I do, this is another way to visualize what's going to happen over this course. And so you see we've got 8 weeks of content, including the break week in there. Discussion sessions happen about every other week, although there's 2 at the very end. Those of you who already read the syllabus in great detail might have picked up that there's 2 bonus lectures that are opportunities for you to take a deeper dive into a specific topic. So there's 1 bonus lecture during the 2nd week of our course. It's going to be an overview of climate change impacts on wildlife. Chris Hoving is going to lead that lecture. And then in the 5th week of the course, there's going to be a bonus session on climate change adaptation and wildlife, which is going to be a deeper dive into our wildlife adaptation menu and adaptation concepts in general. So I certainly won't say those are required, and they will be recorded, just like all of our lectures. So if you need to catch them later on, you can, but I just wanted to call attention to those early on. And some of you have already picked up on this and have emailed questions about this, but this is going to be a workload. So we're trying to be upfront about making sure everyone knows what to expect. We ballpark 2 to 4 hours of work on this course per week outside of the lecture time. Some weeks are pretty light. Some weeks are a little heavier. So it's not a firm or a steady commitment each week. Yeah, you might have to sweep the cat off of the laptop, put some holds on your calendar, let your coworkers know, hey, I'm doing this special assignment, special course training opportunity for me. I'm going to need a little extra time each week just to do, just to keep up with this course. We want you to feel like this is an engaging and successful opportunity. We don't want this to be like one more thing, you know, straining you to the point of overload. If you ever feel like that in this course, that's a sign to contact one of our instructors or your project, you know, your primary contact. And we can think about ways to boil this down for you, maybe even get you into a self-paced option. There's going to be, a little bit of homework after each session as you finish a lecture, then you will complete a step of the online adaptation workbook, answer a few homework questions to sum things up. That's generally the pattern that we'll go through each week. You all are already deep in the weeds of developing the project ideas that are really the center of this course. Like I said, we designed these courses to be as relevant as possible. So we're ideally helping you get your work done each week by helping you develop a climate adaptation plan for this project that you have brought to us. And so most of you are already very far down the path of deciding where I'm working, what's a project on my desk, what are the goals and objectives that I have for this specific area. But we're going to spend just a few minutes here talking a little more concretely about designing the right project and setting things up. Before we dive too much into the project nitty-gritty, I'll back up and pause here. Does anyone have any initial questions about the course format, the workload, the schedule, anything like that? You can take yourself off the mute and speak up or put a question in the chat if anything comes to mind. Or Patricia or Steve, if I've glossed over anything here, let me know.
Hi, it's Caitlin speaking here. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that we would have been in touch with a course contact by now. I don't know if I missed that or if we're still working on that. Should I have talked to someone at this point?
You said this is Caitlin Wilson?
Yep. Yeah.
Do you work for the DNR?
Yep.
So that slacker, Chris Hoving, he's your contact. And he told me ahead of time that he hasn't been in touch with you yet. But
Okay, perfect. Making sure it wasn't something that I buried in my email. That's fine. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks for giving me a chance to embarrass Chris on this recording.
You got it.
Any other questions about what's coming, schedule? Patricia or Steve? Okay. Okay, I'll keep her moving. Oh, Sharon asks, do you know if the lecture, I don't know.
Yeah, carbon registrations are still open and they typically don't schedule those discussion sessions until the registration closes and they poll the participants. So I know at least one of you plans on participating in that course as well, and you can definitely make your voice heard that you don't want those to overlap.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, for those of you who aren't aware, our team at NIAX, we're hosting a couple overlapping courses this spring and winter. We've got a course that's going to be running a few weeks behind ours that's focused on carbon and carbon management decisions and how to account for climate change. Okay, I'll keep her moving, but feel free to keep popping questions in the chat. So we have already learned a ton about you all because of the great work you're doing on your step 1 worksheets. I don't think I've ever been teaching a course where I've had 100% completion rate on people turning in their worksheets on time and having pretty clear ideas about what projects you really want to be thinking about. So I hope that's a signal that folks are coming with, with work that is really relevant to you. And this is not just something abstract that you want to do on the side, but you're bringing work that's actually part of your, your daily grind. And so we don't need to prompt you too much about finding the right projects. I think you all have already identified some good projects, but we will talk about a few ways on how to make things simple and effective, and how to articulate the goals and objectives in a way that really helps you hit the ground running and not, not get too mucked up as you start to interact with our online adaptation workbook. So the advice that I have coming up is more about organizing ideas correctly and not really about picking the right project idea, because I think y'all are doing a great job already with that. And so this is something that we wrestle with at NIAX from time to time. We have this adaptation workbook process. Like we said, we want you to feel successful, but also challenged as you're going through this online course. Our NIAX team, we're also trying to be honest with ourselves about, number one, limitations of working in a Zoom sort of environment, and kind of doing this distance learning can be a challenge. We know that spreading these projects out over a long time, a couple of months, has advantages, but it also has disadvantages. Stuff comes up, people get busy in the spring. And so just a couple thoughts on kind of streamlining or finding the sweet spot for a project. And so one of the first things we look for when you're sending in your project ideas and your step 1 worksheets is, have they bitten off more than they want to chew? And so we're always on guard for folks who have probably too big or too complex of a project for this course. And so if we are sensing, or if you're thinking about a project that has several complex goals and objectives, or that spans many ecosystem types, or contains many different management units that each have, individual needs and prescriptions. If you're working at a large landscape but trying to do detailed thinking across that landscape, that's all a sign that you're probably trying to wrap your arms around something a little too big for this course. And so our instructors will probably be trying to help you trim things down to a manageable set of ideas. On the other hand, if you're just working in your own backyard, if you have maybe just 1 or 2 management objectives, or a very small or homogeneous area, you might not be challenging yourself enough. And you might frankly be a little bored as you walk through this course. And so in that case, we might be asking you to get more precise. Do you have other objectives that you're thinking about? Can you, be more distinct with how you're defining management units across your project area? And we're trying to get you into generally this sweet spot where maybe you have 1 to 3 general goals, 4 to 6, maybe more. This is kind of a loose approximation, but a handful or so of specific objectives that relate to those goals. You could be thinking about 1 or a few ecosystem types or management units. And just be aware of this trade-off between breadth and depth. I know we have some of you who have signed up for the course who are looking at a large landscape because that's the project you need to do. Maybe one of you is looking at a multi-state assessment. One of you is looking at habitat needs for a species across a large tribal ceded territory. And so if that's the scale at which you work, and that's the scale at which you need to incorporate climate change thinking, then by all means stick with that. But just recognize you might have to do a trade-off between breadth and depth in this course. And the thing I'll say is it's not that the adaptation workbook doesn't work for large and complex projects. We have worked with national forests and other partners on projects that span 100,000 acres and many different ecosystem types. But that generally works better one-on-one in a discussion, in-person meetings that we can carry through over multiple sessions. So by all means, if you have something like that in mind, let us know, ask us for assistance. Or if you need help kind of amputating some section of your project, one of your instructors will be able to help with that. So that's a little bit about size and complexity. Something else that your instructor contacts have probably been helping you with, unless you got assigned to that slacker, Chris Hoving. He is not helping you at all. We're going to spend a fair bit of time talking about how you're expressing your goals and objectives. And this might seem like annoying semantics, but it really is going to help you hit the ground running as you move through our adaptation workbook, because these goals and objectives, they're going to be like your North Star that you will refer back to many times in this process, and the decisions you make will be linked to specific goals and objectives. So getting these right will save you some headache and some stress later on. And the difference that we draw between goals and objectives here, and this was in your step 1 worksheet, so you've seen this before, but goals are those general, broad statements about a desired future condition, a process that you want to achieve, or a state that you want to achieve. It might not be quantifiable, but it kind of says the vision that I want in the future. Objectives, on the other hand, those are concise, measurable statements. Objectives are like the specific aspects of the game plan that help you attain your overall goal. And this, in some cases, might have to be a creative thinking exercise if you're not used to expressing your ideas in this way. But whenever possible, we encourage people to pull these goals and objectives from existing management plans or guidance documents that already exist for you. So you shouldn't have to invent these totally out of thin air. The worksheets, and full disclosure, I realized this was a problem in the worksheets that we sent to you all. They didn't make it really clear that goals and objectives are linked. It's like a hierarchy where a goal is general and then there are objectives nested underneath or associated with that goal. One goal can have multiple objectives. Every goal needs to have at least one objective. Okay, and so you see an example here. This is from a different place, a different course, and so I'm not expecting you all to have recreation-focused goals or timber management-focused goals, but this gives you an idea, number one, of kind of the general to specific distinction between a goal and objective, and also how they relate to each other. And so some of you, in your worksheets, you might have already heard this from your project contacts. Like if it's not clear which objectives relate to which goal, we might ask you to just kind of express those in a bulleted list sort of fashion, if that's an easier way to think about it. Another way to express it, just in case this is more intuitive to you, Another thing that you will notice when you get into our online adaptation workbook is the system also asks you to define some management topics, which is just kind of like a shorthand category that you can create for yourself. So if you're, say, working in a property with different ecosystem types, and you have goals in one ecosystem type and goals in another ecosystem type, then you can just use those ecosystems as your topics. Some of you might be thinking about habitat versus population ideas. And so you might create a topic around either of those. For example, you might be thinking about grouse habitat and then grouse population management. The reason, again, that we stress this and that we want to be clear up ahead is that the output of your plan will be organized according to whatever management topics you create. So you kind of decide how you're going to categorize things going forward. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the choices you make for your objectives, those are going to be the touchstones that you keep coming back to about, is this idea feasible? What adaptation ideas do I want to link to this objective to help me accomplish it? So you'll be coming back to these, which is also why we'll probably be worried if you have a dozen objectives. That'll probably get overwhelming for this course. Okay, any questions about these definitions or articulating goals and objectives? Okay. This is a handy self-check for objectives just to make sure that they're detailed enough. So your project contacts will be checking to make sure that your objectives seem specific enough. If they have some sort of quantitative aspect or that they're measurable in some way, that so you could decide yes or no, did I accomplish this? Generally achievable, so they're not, grand visions for the future, and also that they're relevant and time bound. We have a column in that step 1 worksheet for y'all to think about. What's the horizon in which you want to try to accomplish each objective. And the big one here in flashing yellow and red, because this is a wildlife adaptation course, and because later on in the course we're going to be using a tool that is all about helping you identify adaptation actions for wildlife management, we want to make sure that there's a clear connection to wildlife outcomes. And this is something we're all guilty of from time to time, but when you have a hammer, sometimes your problem solving becomes all about that hammer. And you want to kind of showcase the hammer rather than thinking about what is it actually I'm trying to accomplish here. So, for example, if we're reading objectives and it's all about the details of conducting prescribed fire or the details of your invasive species removal program, that's great, but why are you doing that? It's in service to what kind of wildlife habitat? What focal species? What's the basis for doing this in the first place? Surely you're not just pulling invasive species just because that's what you love to do. So we'll be looking to make sure that that connection is there. The other thing that is tempting sometimes is to kind of write your goals and objectives to write them in a way that kind of puts the cart before the horse in terms of climate adaptation. And this is a little silly, but we talk about the Adaptation Workbook as a climate change filter for your goals and objectives. And by that, we mean that you don't need to write your goals and objectives so that adaptation is the end result. Instead, this workbook process that we're going through, the thought process that you all are going to be doing, that's the adaptation. That's the, that's the resilience. And so you can just think about, what are the wildlife outcomes I want to see? Or what are the values I'm trying to sustain or improve? And so your goals don't need to use the term climate change. This process will be helping you think about, can we use climate adaptation to help you continue to meet that goal? So with hopefully those are some useful prompts. With the time we have left, I wanted to pull just a few real examples from things that we observed in your step 1 worksheets. And so I want to offer like a couple examples of ways that we would suggest revising or improving some of the goals and objectives that you all started with. And hopefully this kind of helps you grab some of this vague stuff that I'm throwing at you. So I'm pulling these off of your worksheets. In some cases, I'm pulling this off of the first draft that people sent me, even though I know they might have been half-baked and you're improving them. I'm not doing this to make fun of anyone or like, dunk on anyone who is not used to thinking about climate change adaptation. That's not my point here. We see the same issues in a couple worksheets. So if you express something in one way, there's probably someone else who tried to do the same thing. And so this is just, no shame, pulling examples. So just to run through 4 or 5 of these. This was an example that came up in one of the worksheets. Introduce a long-term plan for maintaining early successional openings on the landscape for specific species. So this is part of the way there to being an objective, right? It's kind of a specific idea, early successional openings. It's kind of specific to species, but introduce a long-term plan for maintaining these. That's not really telling me anything specific enough. That's more like, it reads more like a goal. This is your long-term vision. And so in an objective, I will want to see, again, more like the game plan. How are you going to sustain or create these openings? How many? In what pattern? And are there specific features that make them valuable for these species? So generally, we'd be looking for more specifics. Another example. Increased mixed forest heterogeneity and complexity through the implementation of fire. And this is for a large landscape, a large ceded territory in northern Michigan. And the issue here, again, feels a little too general for such a large landscape. And so in this instance, I followed up with this person to ask, are there more details about how you would implement prescribed fire? Are there specific forest types? Are there specific features? Is there an arrangement of fire? what is it that makes, what kind of habitat characteristics are most important for your focal species here? So again, especially because this is such a large landscape, in order to know if you're having success or not, you should kind of give yourself some more specifics to be able to judge success or failure. Did I do this right? And so just completely shooting from the hip, this is maybe a few objectives that would be a little more specific, right? So give yourself some specific habitat types, forest types, where this fire should happen. Try to give yourself a quantitative target to shoot for. Maybe you've got one objective that is thinking about tribal lands and implementing prescribed fire. Maybe you've got another objective that is specific to a different land ownership and a different practice for implementing those fires. So again, just opportunities for being specific. Another issue that we see regularly is this issue of having objectives that are related to monitoring and assessment. And I get the impulse here because in an ideal world, we would have information and then we would use that information to make an informed decision. And that's kind of part of the adaptive management cycle, right? For the purposes of this adaptation workbook, we don't want you to lead with that information gathering. We have a further step 5 in our adaptation workbook is focused on monitoring and judging success, and giving yourself criteria to judge success or not. For our adaptation workbook, what we want to see you starting with is a management outcome that you want to see. That's the goal. Okay, so what's the outcome related to wildlife that you want to encourage? And then again, objectives are specifics on how you would get there. So when we see words like monitor, assess, design a survey, things like that, I'm not saying those are bad ideas. That's valuable stuff. Grab that, keep it in your pocket until step 5. And instead think about what is the outcome that I would want to see in an ideal world. Another example goal, employ science-based management to adapt to the effects of a warming climate. I mean, yes, broadly, that's the goal. That's what we're all trying to do here. But again, this is that climate change filter idea. Goals and objectives, you don't need to state your desire to adapt. Instead, state your wildlife outcome. And then our adaptation process is helping you find a way to accomplish that goal. So we'll all take it, we'll all agree to take it for granted that you're wanting to adapt. And this plan that you're building is how you're going to show your work. That's how you're going to demonstrate this is my rationale for adapting to climate change. And these are the ideas I came up with. Okay, and I think this is the last one. And so this was one that was very near and dear to my heart, because it was pretty much exclusively focused on forest management. The goal was forest composition and diversity. The objectives are forest composition and diversity. And so the only issue here is that it's not connected to a wildlife outcome. And again, because we're going to be using planning tools that are really focused on wildlife, we're asking you to to kind of lead with the wildlife focus here. And then if you have specific objectives that are related to, forest composition for creating this kind of wildlife habitat, or whatever the case may be, if you're doing an infrastructure or a wetland dredging project, right? Don't lead with the infrastructure, lead with the wildlife, or make sure that there's a connection. So again, I'm not calling you up and saying, oh, how silly are these projects? I can't believe they did it this way. I know we're asking you to frame things in a way that might be unfamiliar to you. First time we're asking you to think about goals and objectives in this way. But again, hopefully this helps articulate some common issues and helps you think about your own goals and objectives. So just a little bit of foreshadowing. If you do want to see what this process leads to, what the outcome of going through this adaptation workbook is, our team at NIAX is creating a library of real-world climate change adaptation demonstration projects. Each of these dots represents a real-world instance where someone like you has had a goal in a particular place, real work they wanted to accomplish, and they walked through this adaptation workbook process, either in a course or on their own, with our help from NIAX. And we're putting these case studies together and sharing them all across the country. We've got bigger than just this Midwest and Northeast focus now. We've got about 150 of these case studies online. We've got a huge backlog. About 400 or more projects have actually used the adaptation workbook. And so we're constantly creating more and more examples. And this is really how we think we're going to move the needle on climate change adaptation in the land management community, is people learning from their peers, seeing what people in situations similar to you are doing. And so our hope at the end of this course is that some of you might agree to be these case study examples and put your own ideas out there for the benefit of the larger community. But if you want to see the end result ahead of time, I'd encourage you to take a look here. We can send out this link afterward. And then at the start, or in our lecture on February 28th, first course, I'll do more of a detailed walkthrough of the different steps of the adaptation workbook, just to give you a look ahead at what the process is like. But for now, we'll just have you focus on goals and objectives in that first step. So, next steps. I think most of you probably got that email from Patricia with the syllabus. I would encourage you to read through that. It has more details than I was able to cover here about the schedule. And also it has instructions for creating your own account on the online adaptation workbook. So I would encourage you to read that syllabus, continue completing or revising your step 1 worksheets and communicating with your project contacts. Follow the steps at the end of the syllabus to create an account at adaptationworkbook.org. You don't have to create your project yet. We can wait until after the first course or first lecture to do that. But we want you to create an account, make sure that that whole process works, that you're able to get in to the website. Sometimes there's problems with people not getting the password authentication emails and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and iron out all those bugs ahead of time before the 28th. And then please get in touch with any questions that you have in this process. We want you to, again, to feel supported and to feel successful as you're going through this. We really appreciate y'all taking the time, and we want you to get a lot out of this. So thanks again. And I will pause here again to see if there's any final questions about next steps or anything like that. Linnea, good question. If you're working in a small group on a project, it's probably best if you create one shared account. One account with a password that everyone has access to, so that you're all just using one login.
Just one more note on group work. So a shared login and a shared password can work for some groups. If you're working in close proximity, if you're all back in the office or anything like that, we also have physical worksheets as Word documents or Excel spreadsheets, depending on what you prefer. And if you want to share those documents amongst your group so that you can kind of comment on things before you put it in the workbook, we can give you access to those as well.
Great, thanks, Patricia. Caitlin, I see your comment. It looks like you already created your account on the Adaptation Workbook. That authentication email went to your spam folder. So that's a heads up for those of you who haven't done it yet. Any other questions or comments for the group?
I guess just thanks. I'm definitely one of those folks that submitted mine kind of half-baked for the sake of being able to get registered. And this is really motivating me to go back and revisit some of my objectives, especially since I haven't heard from Chris yet. So thank you for this. It's been very helpful.
Of course, yeah. Well, thanks everyone for your enthusiasm. We're really excited to have such a great group in this course. You know, you're never sure when you put something out on the internet whether people are gonna, whether folks are gonna grab it, and we're glad you all did.